Beautiful day, bored out of my skull, wanting to get back on trail. So I thought I'd put some permethrin onto the tent. So I thought, well, I'll do a quick little equipment video because did I mention I'm bored? This is a video about my favorite tent once it's set up. This is the Z-Pax triplex, and it's not my favorite tent. It's actually this one over here. This is the Yama Swiftline, asymmetrical, made of sil poly, about 35 ounces. Two-person tent that's genuinely a two-person tent and not a two-person tent that's really 1.5. Certainly is not as big as the triplex, but then again, the triplex, as you might guess from the tri name, is a three-person tent. Weight on the triplex, from memory, fact check me, I think is about 23 ounces. So why do I like the Yama better when it's set up, and why aren't we carrying that on the trail? Well, let's get into that. Triplex is pretty easy to set up. You stake down all four corners. You put up the poles. Both poles are set up for about 125 centimeters. Optional tie downs include ones here at the end. It then pulls this edge out. I think you really need to do that to make sure that you don't accidentally shove the footbox out. And then these two that give you a little bit more room at the head and then at the foot. It's a symmetrical tent. Really the only difference is if you look for the Z-Pax labels on the corners here, it tells you want that side into the wind. And the only reason you want it into the wind is because, as you can see, these flaps overlap. So if the wind's coming this way, it doesn't bell out like it does this way. So other than that, it could be foot end, head end, vice versa. So things I like about this tent. Well, it's light. Fact check me, 22 ounces, 23 ounces, something like that, ignoring the poles. It's been very durable, works well, lots of ventilation. Really haven't had problems with any condensation out on the Appalachian Trail. And in general, it's kept as dry. Things to watch out for. Well, let's see if I can get some video on this. I've exaggerated this a little bit, but sometimes when you pull this bathtub down with weight, I don't know if you can see, but that mesh is starting to tip down. Rain will actually start dripping into your foot box. The other thing you can get with the foot box is if inside you happen to be pushing down with your feet, you can get it to bulge out like that, and then the rain will just come right on into it. Another thing about this tent is if you pitch it high on the corners, there's your foot box when you weight it down with your foot or whatever, and you can see that backsplash can come into this, or just spray. When we had misty kind of clouds going on the Appalachian Trail, that mist was coming right through those little corners and you get wet on the inside. Now this tent's a very effective tent in weather. People have used it and its sister, the duplex, which we also have, very effectively. And so you can stay very dry on this, but you do have to be careful about how you pitch it and make sure that you drop it down lower. Make sure you're conscious about how the netting is on the corners. Ensure you don't shove your foot box out through the back end when you're sleeping. There's just a lot of things to be conscious of on this tent. This is the second tent that we got from Z-Pax. The first tent leaked like a sieve at those tie outs at that seam you see there, as well as all along that ridge line. The material itself seemed to be fine. Second tent leaked, but not as bad. And because of that, and we were going out on the trail, I went ahead and seam sealed it. For the price that you spend on this, my opinion is you shouldn't have to seam seal it to keep it from leaking. A little bit disappointed about that. In fact, a lot about disappointed, but I haven't had any issues with it since then out on the trail. The primary reason that we're using it on the trail is it's a three-person tent and it has a ton of room for the weight. And so far, with the seam sealing, it hasn't done us wrong. So if this is my favorite tent though, when it's set up, why aren't we using this on the trail? It boils down to two reasons. One, it takes a little bit more to set up. And two, when we get to the foot box, you'll see that it really couldn't handle two 25-inch pads, unless maybe mummy style. I have not tried that yet. And if there was two 25-inch wide mummy style pads, I think it might work. So why is this hard to set up? Well, it's because if you look on their website, there is a whole elaborate thing about stake that corner, then stake that corner. Then you run over and stake that corner over there. Then you set this pole over here to 125 centimeters and stake it out. set this pole over here to 132, and then stake it out. And then you come around and you stake out these auxiliary ones in a specific order. Now, to make this easy, because I do not remember this stuff, what I have done is labeled it. So you can see on each one of the corners, I've labeled it corresponding to the steps in the Yama Mountain Gear website. So this would be step 7 to put this down. Up here, this is 4. This one's emphatically got a head side and a foot side. The head side is wider. It goes down a little more coffin shape on the other side. One of the things that I had done as well was label the head of the foot box, as well as try to make sure that I labeled the measurements, because I don't remember those in between. So here's the 132 centimeter side. Here's foot. And here's step 4, where I have the 125 centimeter side. One of the other things in the setup instructions that is a little bit tedious is they have words about, well, in step 2, when you're on this corner, the length should be about halfway, or use most of the line, or 1/3 of the line. Well, who's going to remember that when you're out there in the field, particularly if you're not doing this day by day? If I go out there once every few weeks, I can guarantee you I'm wondering what is what. So in order to make this simpler, I don't know if you can see it, but there is a black mark that I've put on these lines. And that black mark is roughly where I want it to be in regards to the line lock to match what their recommendations are. So this was a halfway length line. If I went around to one of the others, it'd be 1/3 or most or whatever, but just mark. One of the extra steps that you have on the Swift line that you don't have on the duplex or triplex is that you have to pull that bathtub out. So on this side, you can see that the bathtub has an extra line that's being pulled out. And on all 4 corners, that'll be the case to stretch that out. Whereas on the duplex, it just floats. So let's take a look at this bad boy. Now that it's all set up, here's the small side of the vestibule. I'd say the vestibule size is a bit smaller than what you get on a duplex, or certainly a triplex, but it's still a decent sized vestibule. On this side, you notice it's got a D door. You don't have that pole blocking you when you go in and out, which is nice. One thing I don't like about it though is in this design, the handle goes down into the mud and dirt. Whereas on the Z-Packs design, the handle actually is up above and it keeps it from getting quite as dirty. On the other side, the vestibule is just huge. And I don't think this camera is gonna do justice to it. But if you unclip it, you can see that that vestibule is just immense. You put 2 packs under there, you can almost sleep under there. It really sheds the water well. You don't get much backsplash. Snow seems to fall off it fairly easily. I've had it in snow, hail, rain. It's been a good tent. It also doesn't have a whole lot of issues with condensation, which I'll show you in a minute. I'm down at the foot end. You can see it's a nice high bathtub. And from this view, you can also see that there's a fair bit of space between the bathtub and where the wall here would be. So I tend to find that condensation is not an issue. My feet can be much more on the base of it without having to worry. The Swift line can be set up with its doors, as you were shown before, all zipped up and in full storm mode. It also has another few options. You can actually play around with ventilation because you have 2 zippers on this, so you can set it up to get a little ventilation on the ridge line on both sides. The other thing you can do is roll it up to get some outstanding views. Let's look at a few of these configurations. The Swift line can be set up so that you can peel back the doors, allow yourself some pretty good ventilation, and still have a bit of a vestibule on that side. But if you really want to go at it, I'm going to pull all the doors back and show you what happens. You can see that there is a lot of room for viewing, as well as over here on the head end, you can actually see up a little bit towards the stars. Even more, you can peel back over here at the foot end. You can get a lot of ventilation on this bad boy. Provides you a lot of flexibility, and I really like the combination of storm worthiness as well as the ability in nice weather to be able to just peel this thing back. When it's in this mode, you just leave the stakes in the ground. That way, in case something comes up, wind blows, rain, whatever, you can get out and set it up fairly quickly just by pinning it back to its stakes. As far as interior features of this, there's really not much. As you can see, there's 2 nets, kind of the standard on the end. If I pan up, you might be able to see that there's a little bit of a clothesline as well as an attachment point. It's kind of a nice touch. As I guess is gaining a little more popularity these days with the Durston tent, this thing is a 20D sill poly, so it doesn't stretch when it's wet, sag. It did need to be seam sealed. However, I just went and paid to have them do that. If I had to do it all over again, and if it's a possibility, I would definitely pay to have some of these panels different colors. I just chose to have it all one color. In hindsight, I think it would have made it easier to set it up and figure out orientation if I had a little clue on terms of color. I like it once it's set up. I've had it out in heavy rain. I've had it out in sleet, hail, snow. I've had it out in beautiful weather. The backsplash is so minimal. The ability to adjust the ventilation there's so many ways you can do it. It's very, very roomy. We're pulling it out now because thought occurred to us if we had something go wrong with the triplex, we may not be able to respond really quickly. We can leave this with our daughter and maybe have her ship out a tent in case we get ourselves in a fix. I think there's only one other video that I saw on YouTube on it, so I thought, oh, what the heck. I think it deserves at least a little piece. And here it is. Do with it as you want.